Eisenhower's convoy entered the German POW camp while black smoke curled from the records office, and before the guards could pretend it was only trash, a burning file blew across the yard and landed at his feet, with one prisoner number still visible, half the page gone, half the truth still alive. And when he ordered the fire stopped, the camp commander stepped in front of the door as if the flames were protecting something worse than names. Eisenhower arrived at the camp expecting a surrender inspection, but the first thing he saw was not a line of prisoners or a raised white flag, because smoke was rising from the small records office near the eastern fence, while German clerks carried boxes toward the fire pit behind the building. An American captain named Miller jumped from the second jeep and ordered the clerks to stop, but one of them threw another bundle into the flames before the MPs reached him, and half-burned papers scattered across the yard as prisoners pressed closer behind the wire. The German camp commander, Colonel Bremer, stepped forward with his hands raised and said the records were infected medical papers. But Eisenhower looked past him and saw ration cards, transfer slips, and prisoner photographs curling at the edges inside the fire. Eisenhower ordered the pit drowned with water, and when two MPs tipped a barrel over the flames, a blackened file cover slid into the mud with the words "Special Barak Register" still readable across the corner. Bremer tried to step on the cover before anyone noticed, but Miller pulled him back by the sleeve, and Eisenhower ordered every German officer moved away from the office wall while the wet papers were gathered piece by piece. A young clerk named Otto was caught hiding 3 folders beneath his coat, and when Miller opened the first one, it held only ordinary prisoner lists, but the second held a row of numbers with no names beside them, and the third contained blank death certificates already stamped. Eisenhower ordered the camp gates locked from both sides, not to trap the prisoners, but to stop the German staff from moving another sheet of paper, another witness, or another box before the Americans understood what had nearly vanished. Inside the records office, the shelves had been cleared in a hurry, but one drawer had jammed halfway open, and an American sergeant forced it wider with a knife, revealing a packet of intake cards wrapped in a torn kitchen towel. The cards belonged to prisoners who were not in the main ledger, and each card carried a red pencil mark across the top, while several had been stamped transferred without a destination, a date, or a receiving officer. Eisenhower ordered a full prisoner count by Barak, and when Barak 6 failed to match the master list, Bremer said the missing men had died during an air raid, but the burial ledger for that week had already burned too badly to prove anything. Miller found one surviving page from the fire, and it showed that the camp had received 24 prisoners from a railway convoy 3 nights earlier, yet only 19 appeared in the morning count, which meant 5 men had disappeared before Eisenhower's arrival. Eisenhower turned the burned page toward Bremer and ordered him held inside the guardroom under watch, because the inspection had become an investigation into why a camp would burn its own memory while the prisoners were still alive behind the wire. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. The escalation began when Eisenhower ordered every save paper dried on blankets across the yard, and American clerks worked beside prisoner witnesses while the German staff was kept away from the tables so no one could claim the records had been mixed by accident. Miller compared the railway intake page with the kitchen ration book, and he found 24 extra bread portions issued for 2 days after the convoy arrived, proving that the 5 missing men had eaten inside the camp before their names were removed. A prisoner named Franz Keller stepped from Barak 6 and said the missing men had not died in an air raid, because he had seen them marched after midnight toward the old workshop building, where the windows had been painted from the inside. Eisenhower ordered the workshop opened at once, and the MPs found no prisoners inside, but they discovered 5 straw beds, 5 empty bowls, and a wall marked with scratches that counted 4 nights, not 2. Behind a loose brick in the workshop stove, Miller found a folded paper covered with tiny handwriting, and the note said the 5 men had been separated because one of them carried knowledge about a hidden convoy route used by German officers fleeing west. Bremer denied knowing the note, but the camp motor sergeant admitted that 3 staff cars had been fueled after curfew during the same nights, and the fuel tickets had been signed by Bremer's adjutant, Captain Weiss. Weiss was brought from the officer hut, and he claimed the cars had been used to collect medical supplies. But the garage log showed the cars returned with mud from the forest road, not the town road where the hospital stood. Eisenhower ordered patrols to follow the forest road while Miller searched the garage, and inside the spare tire rack he found a prisoner cap, a torn sleeve number, and a railway pass stamped with the name of one missing prisoner from the burned intake sheet. The patrol returned with a broken crate from a roadside ditch, and inside it were ash-covered files that had been burned somewhere else before being dumped, which meant the records office fire was only the final part of a larger destruction. A German guard named Hasse suddenly asked for protection and said the 5 prisoners had been loaded into a covered truck before dawn, but he refused to name the destination until Eisenhower ordered him separated from Bremer's men and placed under American guard. Hasse then described an abandoned schoolhouse beyond the forest road, where officers met at night with civilian clothes, travel papers, and prisoners who knew too much about the retreat routes, and Eisenhower sent Miller with 2 jeeps before Bremer could warn anyone. The schoolhouse was empty when the patrol arrived, but the stove was warm, the floor held fresh boot prints, and one classroom desk carried 5 prisoner numbers written in pencil beside a single word that made Miller stop reading aloud, because the word was witnesses. The major consequence came when Miller returned with the schoolhouse desk drawer, because hidden under the wood was a packet of escape papers bearing the names of German officers, civilian addresses, and signatures copied from camp transfer orders. Eisenhower laid the packet beside the burned intake cards and ordered Bremer's entire administrative staff arrested, because the missing prisoners were no longer a record problem. They were witnesses being moved to protect officers preparing false escapes. The prisoners in Barrack 6 were pulled into the yard for identification, and Keller pointed out the adjutant Weiss as the man who had selected the 5 names from the railway convoy after asking which prisoners had worked near retreat headquarters. Weiss tried to deny the selection, but an American clerk found his handwriting on one unburned transfer stub where the destination line had been scraped away and rewritten with a fake hospital name. Eisenhower sent a messenger to division headquarters asking for intelligence officers, then ordered a medical team to examine every prisoner moved through the workshop, because any witness held outside the normal count might carry injuries never entered into the camp books. In the infirmary, the medics discovered that 5 fever charts had been removed from the patient board, but the thermometer logs still showed temperatures taken each morning for men whose names had been erased from the wall. A German nurse admitted that one of the 5 had been too weak to travel, and she said Weiss ordered him carried anyway after Bremer shouted that the Americans were less than a day away and the files had to be burned before surrender. The forest patrol widened the search and found wagon tracks leading from the schoolhouse toward an old quarry road, where the gravel showed signs of a vehicle turning hard and stopping near a storage shed marked with a faded mining sign. Inside the shed, the soldiers found 5 torn blanket strips, a broken water jug, and a message carved into a wooden beam with a nail, warning that one guard had promised to exchange the witnesses for passage through American lines. The consequence reached the entire camp when Eisenhower canceled all prisoner transfers, shut the kitchens under American supervision, and ordered the guard towers cleared of German personnel, because any part of the camp staff could still be helping the escape network. Bremer was brought into the yard and shown the carved message, and when he saw the words about exchange, he looked toward Hasse before looking at Weiss, revealing that the commander had not fully controlled the men who were moving the witnesses. Eisenhower understood then that the destroyed records had triggered a race between 3 groups: the German officers who wanted silence, the guards who wanted escape money, and the Americans who had to find 5 living men before they became bodies without files. The major reversal came after midnight when Hasse broke his earlier story and admitted the 5 prisoners had not been taken directly toward the border because the truck had turned back toward the camp after stopping at the quarry road. Miller spread the camp map across a table, and Hasse pointed to an old potato cellar beneath the abandoned chapel, a place removed from the official Barak map after a roof collapse years earlier, which meant the prisoners could be hidden inside the wire while everyone searched outside. Eisenhower ordered no alarms sounded, then sent 2 quiet teams through the chapel yard while the prisoners remained in barracks, because any visible movement might cause the remaining conspirators to kill the witnesses or burn the last papers. The cellar door was found beneath loose boards near the chapel steps, and when the MPs lifted it, they heard coughing from below, followed by a weak voice asking whether the Americans had saved the register before it burned. 4 prisoners were brought out alive, but the 5th space was empty, and one of the rescued men said the strongest witness, a former German army clerk named Adler, had been taken away only an hour earlier by someone wearing an American jacket. The reversal changed the danger completely, because the enemy was no longer only German officers destroying records, but someone using captured American clothing to move through the surrender confusion and carry Adler out under Allied protection. The rescued prisoners gave Eisenhower a new truth, saying Adler had copied a secret list before the fire, and that list named officers who had exchanged prisoners, trucks, and gold for false identities during the collapse of the front. Miller searched the chapel cellar and found Adler's hidden copy inside a cracked candle box, but the paper was written in shorthand, and the only man who could read every symbol had just been taken away by the disguised escort. Eisenhower ordered every American jacket in the camp checked, every jeep halted, and every gate log compared, while Miller discovered that one vehicle had left minutes earlier carrying a wounded prisoner supposedly bound for a field hospital. The gate guard remembered the driver because he wore American clothing but used the wrong unit patch, and he had presented a pass signed with Miller's copied name, which proved the escape network had stolen Allied signatures from the inspection papers. A motorcycle patrol caught the vehicle at a blown bridge outside the village, but the driver escaped into a barn before the soldiers reached him, and Adler was found in the back seat with his hands tied, alive, but unable to speak from smoke inhalation. Eisenhower ordered Adler carried back under guard and placed beside the rescued prisoners, because the man everyone thought was being hidden outside the camp had been hidden inside it, then stolen under an American disguise after the real evidence survived the fire. The final irreversible event began at sunrise when Adler regained enough strength to read the shorthand list from the candle box, and Eisenhower ordered every named officer, guard, clerk, driver, and prisoner broker assembled separately before the camp could invent another version. Adler read the first names slowly while Miller marked them on the camp roster, and each name connected to a burned file, a false transfer, a missing ration entry, or a vehicle log signed after curfew. One German guard tried to flee through the kitchen yard during the reading, but prisoners from Barak 6 blocked his path with benches until American MPs seized him, and inside his coat they found gold rings sewn into a cloth belt. The rings matched property entries from prisoners listed as transferred, not dead, and Eisenhower ordered the surviving property cabinet opened in front of witnesses, where empty envelopes carried the same red pencil mark as the burned intake cards. Bremer finally broke when Adler read Weiss's name beside a route marked for Switzerland, and he accused Weiss of moving the 5th witness without authorization, but Adler answered by identifying Bremer's own signature on the original exchange order. Miller brought the half-burned file cover from the first fire and placed it beside Adler's copy, then matched the numbers from both pieces, proving that the special Barak register had contained the exact men used as bargaining pieces by the escape network. The irreversible step came when Eisenhower signed an order removing all German command authority from the camp, freezing every prisoner movement, and placing the recovered papers, property envelopes, vehicle logs, and Adler's testimony under armed evidence guard. Weiss tried one final escape by claiming the list was forged, But the rescued prisoners each identified his voice from the chapel cellar, and Adler read the hidden notation that only the camp clerk would know, a notation showing which officers had paid for new lives. Eisenhower ordered the names copied 3 times, one copy for military intelligence, one for the provost marshal, and one sealed inside a metal ammunition box carried by a courier directly to headquarters, making the destroyed records useless as a cover. The camp prisoners watched as the burned office was emptied. The fire pit was dug open, and even the ash was sifted through wire screens so fragments of numbers, stamps, and signatures could be saved before wind or rain erased them. By afternoon, Bremer, Weiss, Hasse, and the named guards were marched past the same pit where the files had burned, and no one in the camp mistook the moment for another transfer because their hands were tied and American charges were read aloud. The final act could not be undone because the fire that had been meant to destroy the truth instead revealed which papers mattered, which men panicked, and which witnesses survived long enough to turn a burning records office into the doorway of a full military case. At dusk, Eisenhower stood in the cleared records office while Miller placed the rescued register fragments beneath glass plates to dry, and Adler wrote the 5 missing names on a clean sheet with a shaking hand. The old ledgers were gone, but the new record began with the men the fire had failed to erase, and when the sealed evidence box left for headquarters, Bremer watched from under guard as the smoke above the camp finally thinned without taking the truth with it. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more untold WWII stories.